All right, good morning, KOTA Territory. Welcome to KOTA Now's Author Spotlight. It's been a month, and last month we talked to author Sean Covell. This month we are talking to award-winning author Gary Wietgrefe.
Yes, very good.
So, kind of starting off in here, let me pull up that way. Our viewers can see what city you're
Right.
in,
Okay.
from, stuff like that. But kind of starting off. On our morning shows on Good Morning Black Hills, we were talking a little bit about your career.
Yes.
When we say award-winning author, what are we talking about?
Well, yes, you have to write some books first, right? And then I submitted them to different places, and I've been pleasantly surprised. I've won several awards on these three books: first, second, fourth place, second, third, and fourth place. Yeah.
Second, third, and fourth place.
Yeah.
So what books are we talking about here?
Let's start with this one. It's Culture, Relating to Ancient Culture.
Ooh.
And that is about how culture's changing, and it's actually written as a mystery. Each chapter starts as a riddle,
Right.
and you try to figure out the riddles of why culture is changing so fast at the end of the 20th, beginning of the 21st century. Historically, no matter where I've
Right.
traveled around the world, 40-some countries, societies have traditionally changed very, very slowly. And in the last 50 years,
Right.
they've all changed very, very quickly, and there's reasons. And so that's covered in this book. And this has won a Global Book Award in Culture, Societal Changes. This one is won finalist in Global Book Awards as a educational volume. And this, I relate stories of growing up here in South Dakota to how learning systems have changed over the centuries. I mentioned this morning in the newscast how learning is so much different now than in the past. And so I go way back to like Aristotle and biblical characters through like Lincoln and Einstein and Edison and Bell and people like that, how they learned compared to how we learn now. And so that's what's covered in this, Relating to Ancient Learning.
And you mentioned a little bit, going back to, and here we'll get to the third book in a minute,
That's
but
fine.
Going back to the first one
Culture.
that you mentioned.
Yeah.
What was the thought process behind starting with a riddle?
When you write, you always try to figure out what the people are interested in. And sometimes it's hard to express when you're talking about a subject that might be fairly boring. I mean, it might be boring. I didn't want it to be boring, all right? And so what I did, again, no matter where we traveled, I found that everybody has a unique culture. And I tried to relate it back to me growing up. And a lot of people ask, you go, what is ancient? And I go, well, I'll just put it this way. My grandfather was born June 30th, 1891. And that was before, obviously, vehicles,
Right.
radio, TV, airlines, vaccinations were just getting started.
Right.
And so he was disabled and lived with us until he passed away in 1976. And so I was able to relate wherever we were at. Some places were more advanced than others. For example, we have an orphan girl in Uganda, and they don't have metal. They eat with their hands. I mean, it's just a hut in northern Uganda. And so it's different how, it's difficult to relate to them if you haven't had an experience without technology.
And I mean, how many places did you visit for when you were writing this?
Oh, it's not necessarily I visited to write this.
Right.
I basically traveled, and then I wrote it based on my memories from those incidents. And so I actually wrote a good share of this when I was in Mexico. My wife and I retired over 12 years ago, and we got an opportunity to house at a mansion in southwest Mexico, and we decided that we couldn't hardly speak Spanish. And if we're going to be there all summer, ended up being there 2 summers. And I took my notes from old history books. I like to do, 1, 2, 3 page book reports on
Kind of.
books I read.
I was going to say, getting
And
used to it or accustomed to it.
yeah, my wife was in the antique business, and every time she'd go to an antique store, I'd go through the books and find these old late 1800s, early 19th century or 20th century history books and read those and make notes. And so that's what I used to help compile the long bibliographies and details in the book.
Right. And I mean, kind of diving, talking about travels, right? Let's talk about your third book that you were about to show, Destination North Pole.
Yeah.
I see there a one word that's really intriguing to me: bicycle. What do you mean by 5,000 kilometers by bicycle?
Well, I tell you what, I turned 65. This is the first in the series. This was the second. They came out close to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And my mind was tired on this book tour, over 700 pages. And I asked my wife, I go, would you like to go on a bicycle ride? And we've done overnight rides before.
Right.
And she said, well, I would drive. And I go, well, that's great. That's great. I'm thinking about bicycling to our niece and nephews in North Pole, Alaska.
Gary, no, you can't tell me that you actually, did you, 5,000?
Yeah, that's my picture. This is my shadow.
No, Gary, you're killing me. Oh, man.
Like I said, I turned 65 and finished the book tour in Mexico, actually, where I'd written it. And I flew back to Pierre, and my wife came a couple of days later. In the meantime, I'd packed up my bags, and within a week, I took my old 10-year-old bike and started heading to North Pole, Alaska.
Oh, my goodness.
That's where our niece and nephew live, and I didn't know if I would make it, didn't know if the bike would be making it. And my wife had to stay back for Memorial Day. And she had lost her oldest brother, and she stayed back for Memorial Day, and then caught up with me in western Saskatchewan, which worked perfect, because that's about where you run out of regular motels. We never camped. I bicycled until my wife found a clean bed. And so once she caught up with me, I threw all my bags, stuff in the car, and she went ahead every day and would weigh me down, or sometimes we had cell coverage, weigh me down and say, this is where we're staying for the night. We'd find a place to eat, or we took supplies, canned Spam and whatever we needed. So yes, I bicycled, and people ask me, well, what were the hiccups and stuff like that? It was I couldn't wait to get up every day and bicycle. I averaged 75 miles a day for 40 days.
Oh, man.
And
I'm out of breath just listening. You tell this.
Well, I'm excited because, like I said, I was 65, and it was just an amazing trip for me and my wife. She got to drive the 3,000 miles by herself. Our niece and nephew, for example, my 6-year-old grandniece. This is cool. My 6-year-old grandniece was, by the way, there's the map. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, right there.
And so it's up by the Arctic Circle. Most of it was in Canada, so that's why I said kilometers. But my grandniece was 6 years old, and every day she'd ask her parents, when's Uncle Gary getting here? When's Uncle Gary getting here? And when I arrived, she had drawn this sketch on a white paper plate, taped it to the picture window. And so when I arrived, there was me in my 6-year-old niece's mind, coming in. And so, I tell you, I love it. I wish I could draw that good. And so each chapter, I put her little symbol on the beginning of each chapter, and when I finished the book, I signed it and gave her my first hard copy. She's a dear little girl to me.
That sounds amazing. And again, like I said, I'm just out of breath just knowing that you did that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's such an adventure, and I can assure you, that takes a lot of energy, guts, everything.
Yeah, but when you're excited to do it, and I, in retirement, like I said, we've been retired 12 years, and in retirement, my wife and I want to keep our minds busy, so I read and write, and keep our bodies busy, so we walk and hike.
Yeah, and talking about, kind of keeping your bodies busy and kind of keeping your mind busy, what lessons did you learn while you were on this trip, bicycling?
Enjoy it, because there's a lot of things that can kill you out there, and especially, I'll back up. People thought that once I learned that I was going to do this, because I didn't really want to tell anybody, I was just going to do it on my own. It's not a fundraiser or anything. And they go, Gary, you know, cars are going to kill you, trucks are going to kill you. And they go, well, it's, you know, it can happen. It can happen. All right. So they said, would you do a blog on your website? And I go, okay, you know, because I had a website promoting my books. Okay, relatingtoancients.com. The last 30 days of the trip is actually on there. And so I did a daily blog. And I think what they were really interested in is when I was going to stop or what was going to kill me, you know. And so that was the excitement to them. But to me, I did a daily blog on my phone. I put up pictures. And the way the book is set up, every day is an adventure. And so let me find the beginning of a chapter.
Let's look at some of that.
Yeah, here. Should have had my glasses on. Each day, I put the name of the towns we stayed in, because we never camped, and then the data. So this is the mileage each day, the time I left, the time I got there, the total mileage, the elevations, because there's 8 mountain ranges.
And here, let me see if I can zoom into
Oh,
that, so
okay.
that way some of our viewers, if you want to
that's
pull
fine.
it up real quick.
Yeah, will that help?
Yeah, let me see if I can.
So you'll see the locations, the towns, then you'll see the data. And so I didn't want to bore people with data,
Right.
because this is written as a travel log, but I wrote it during COVID, because COVID shut us down.
Right.
And so I wrote it so that people could sit in their armchair and take an adventure on a bicycle at 10 miles an hour from central South Dakota
Right.
to northern Alaska through much of Canada, much of western Canada, and just enjoy the adventure without leaving their home. And so I was excited to write it, and
I mean, you got me excited to write it. Well, I'll tell you right now, you got me excited to possibly read it and get it later.
All right. Well, I got 2 things for you. Because you're in digital. So what I did is I put my blog in there, my daily blog, sometimes a paragraph or 2, and then the rest of 2 or 3, 4 pages of what happened that day is really what animal didn't kill me. Right?
Oh, man.
I
I
mean,
mean, like you said, there's a lot out there that a lot of people, at least from the standpoint of someone that hasn't done that, you hear all these horror stories of like animal attacks and stuff like that, especially in the wilderness of Canada, that your mind instantly goes, are you crazy?
a lot of people have said that to me. But you got to brush some kind of things off.
Right.
Well, you see on the cover of the book, this is a wood bison. Wood bison are 25% roughly bigger than our plains bison. They're a huge animal.
Man, yeah.
They're the largest land animal in North America. And I've seen hundreds of them. This bull, it wasn't actually this bull, but it was one like it. It was around this corner. When I took this picture in northern British Columbia for the book, and that's my shadow. And he got up and was running beside me. So I take my cell phone, and I'm taking pictures, trying to keep on the road. His tail sticking straight out, and dust coming off his hoofs and stuff, because I couldn't let him turn around. I had to keep up with him, and they run about 15, 16 miles an hour on a good run. They can go a lot faster.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like...
And so I had to keep him going. Well, the point is that the guy that did my cover inserted this bison in there. Go, Gary, it's too blurry, I can't use it. So he inserted that. And then I seen hundreds of black bears and grizzlies. And so I needed a black bear, and my wife took this picture. So this is the only other thing that's inserted. It's a black bear, big bear, next to a vehicle. This lady, and I hope you can see that.
I'll zoom in too.
A lady stopped in front of my wife and held out something to feed that bear. Luckily, the bear was smarter than the lady, and the bear walked
Yeah,
around.
if we can point to that bear where it's at real quick.
Like right up there. Can you see
Oh,
it?
there it is.
Oh,
Yeah,
right
there we go.
Right there on the
Oh,
highway.
man.
Okay.
Look at that.
And so my wife was trying to figure out how in the world am I going to save that lady. Luckily, the bear was smart enough, and it went around the car, and it took off. But those are the kinds of things that you hopefully don't run into. I mean, and I had a mother moose, come and face me, and I stop, and then I see your little baby coming up to the highway, and I go, oh man. my nephew had told me more people get killed in Alaska, and there's lots of bears in Alaska. More people get killed or injured by bears in Alaska, or by moose, than bears.
Yeah.
And moose will stomp you to death. And I go, here, oh man, I'm used to around cattle, but okay, this is moose. Their legs are like tall. I think I could have bicycled under her legs. Anyway, the little baby comes up, and she looks, and I don't think they can see very well. She looks at me. I didn't move. I tried to. I was unusual for her. And once the baby caught up with her, she walks across the highway and leaves. So that's one little story on one day. I've had sandhill crane draft me. I've had. There's wolf stories, dog stories, fox stories. It's fun.
I'm gonna have to get that book now. It's very, oh man, it's.
Can I? Okay, since you're in media and in electronic media, if you go onto YouTube, enter the name of the book and my last name, my grandnephew was in videography school, and he did a 9.5-minute YouTube video. Took all the pictures of my wife and films in mine and shrunk it into 9.5 minutes. So it's a fun YouTube video. Destination North Pole, Gary Wietgrefe.
So if some of our viewers are interested, if they're not readers, not very big readers, they can at least see the adventure through it.
They'll see the live animals on the road. They'll see me bicycling. They'll see the scenery. It's a fun little video.
No, and where can some of our viewers get these 3 books that we just talked about?
Obviously, they're available in the libraries. My website, relatingtoancients.com. That is, I answer all of those emails and send out all the books, which I autograph. Of course, you can get them on Amazon and any place. Locally, downtown Rapid City, the Mercantile down at Alex Johnson. Jen handles my books down there, all of my books. And so it's a fun little store to visit, and she obviously sells to locals and tourists. So yeah, they can get all my books down there.
Awesome. Well, I mean, okay, so we talked about some very action-packed books.
Yeah.
And now let's get into some of the books that, at least from from the description that I read before we went on this morning, it seems to be the 10th book seems to be a retelling of your childhood.
It is, and I had 2 years ago I put out this on Dakota Country Poems, and I like writing poetry. I don't necessarily thought about publishing it, so I put this out, and this got fairly popular. But there was a poem that I had written in basically 2 days. It was Humor and Learning in a One-Room School. It's a 350 stanza rhyming epic about me in 1st through 4th grade. So it's a fun book, and it allowed me to look back as a child and things that happened to me when I was the only one in my class. I was a 1st grader by myself. I was a 2nd grader by myself. There was 8 grades in the school, and so there's lots of funny things that happen in school that are so different from what happens today.
And I think I mentioned it earlier on Good Morning Black Hills that at least what it seemed to me is that this book was kind of a window into what was education during your time as a child versus
way back then.
Dare I say
No. Yeah, ancient, right?
Yes.
No. You're right. It is a window into what used to be, which is, I think many of the children in school today are intrigued by it, but they are not familiar with it.
Right.
And so I wrote this really as a fun, epic poem. But my sketch artist, I don't know if you can see that, but my sketch artist is out of South Carolina. And she drew sketches. All these sketches are inside, and there's a bunch more.
There you go.
Okay? These sketches, she had picked stanzas and would draw the burning barrel, the flag, the school bell, the inside the classroom, things like that. And so she'd pick stanzas, right? But she said, Gary, there's kids that have no clue what you're talking about when you say blackboard.
Right.
They use whiteboard and smartboards.
Even I barely growing up going to school in Chicago. Even I rarely saw blackboards because it was during a time where it was between that transition when classroom started getting blackboards and smart boards,
Whiteboards, yeah.
whiteboards, and it was very different. So reading a little excerpt from, getting like a little excerpt from the book, I was like, yeah, no, it was to think a time, at least for me, and I'm just giving my age out there. I'm 25, so I'm still fairly young.
Yeah. You're actually younger than our youngest grandchild.
So I'm young.
You are.
But it's really cool to see this like this, I guess, the similarities, but at the same time, the evolution of the classroom, especially in a classroom where I grew up, which was filled with children, versus a classroom that is very much a group of like 15, 20 people, probably 20 people max. Even the class size being like 10 to 15 people. And to me, it's so cool. I find it so fascinating and so awesome to learn history through the eyes of somebody that has lived it and that is living it.
I appreciate, and I'm sure the audience appreciates your background, because it takes that interest to actually see and observe what's going on today, what happened in your parents' or grandparents' generations. And it is different, although the goal was the same.
Right.
We didn't have running water. We had a ceramic crock for water. But when I write about a ceramic crock, it means nothing. What's a ceramic crock?
I can tell you right now, I don't even know.
Right. Okay. So the book is, even though it's a 350 stanza rhyming poem, an epic, because my sketch artist says, Gary, they don't understand. What I did is most of the rest of the book explains the stanzas. And so I'll have a little asterisk in a stanza. You go back to the commentary, and it'll explain. That's what we use for water. We had one common glass, 8 to 14 kids in school, depending on the year. One glass. So the teacher and the kids use the same glass. A parent would bring a ceramic crock with their water every day, and you'd punch the bottom and fill your glass with water, and that's what we all drank out of. And so that's, you know.
Yeah, I mean, today we have water fountains.
Water fountains, or bottles of water, you know. Yeah, we didn't. That.
You know. Yeah, it wasn't that popular back then to carry around something like that. So.
Well, when I was in the first grade, it started between Hoven and Gettysburg, and towards hunting season, I was actually adopted by the older boys. I would get to go out and during recess, and we would come back, you know, leave at 10, and we'd get back at noon looking for pheasant tracks and, you know, coon and fox and everything else. And so I'd carry a ketchup bottle with water in it. So that was my water bottle.
Oh, man. Nowadays we have the I guess, well-established water bottles that we carry.
Yeah, this is a glass ketchup bottle, yeah.
But no, and it's really cool. And it seems to me that during our interview on Good Morning Black Hills, you said that, you know, it wasn't necessarily meant for the younger generation, but it seems like it attracted the eye of like those early grade school kids as well.
Yes, I didn't really write it for a specific audience until I finished it. And I go, the kids don't know how to use index, or they need to know how to use index. And so I put an index, 360-word index in the back. So they can go back when I talk about memories or ceramic crocks or outhouses, they can go and find those stanzas. The other thing I did is I added, for teachers, I added 50 questions. And so I start out with easy questions. And then I get more and more complex. So by the time you get to the end, you know, you're at least high school level when you talk about allegories and things like that. And so I ask the questions and have explanations. But I find that in the farmers markets, I go to the local farmers markets, and I've had several author signings in the last 6 weeks since it's come out. And I find that it's mainly parents and grandparents that buy it. And not a lot of them, but some of them have been to one-room schools, or their parents have.
Right.
But you know why they want it? They want to read it to their grandchildren. And so I was fortunate last week to go to a one-room school, and they had six children. And I went through the book. They were asking me questions about it, you know, where I've been and things. And I told them how I went to a one-room school and how I was the only kid in my class. and two of them were the only kids in their class, and so they could identify with me, and I would, get down on my knee, and we would be talking about in these pictures they'd recognize, and it was just fun being around small kids. Now this, I would say you'd want to be at least third or fourth grade, but probably fifth, sixth, middle grades. This would be a great book for middle grades, and I think I have it in like 9 schools already. So.
Oh, that's so good. That's amazing to hear. I mean, especially for just having that window into what it was and kind of relating it to what it is now.
And it was fun. It's fun. Whatever you do, the learning, I think the more enjoyable it is, the more likely you're going to learn. And so that's why I didn't want to have an old boring old guy's, old story. No, these are fun stories. And I tell stories about, the teacher smoking in the outhouse and things like that, we had Montgomery Ward Sears and J.C. Penney catalogs. We didn't have toilet paper.
I was going to say, stuff that today, a lot of stuff, we don't even have the J.C. Penney catalogs anymore.
No, but we use those papers, and, well, if you're smoking in there and throw the butt down, the fire can start, all right? It did. So there's stories like that in this book.
And, at least to me, what it sounds like, and maybe some of our viewers can relate, it sounds like the career of an author for you seems to be a lot of experience, personal experience, and putting it on paper in an enjoyable way, so that way the reader can also feel what you went through, kind of in using kind of sensory terminology here, but see what you went through and kind of hear, and for the destination North Pole, hear what you went through, sort of. And it seems like, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but for you, being an author is very much trying to give your life in an enjoyable way for other people.
Yes, because at work, we all have, well, not all, but a lot of people have technical writing. And I help write newsletters. I developed bulk handling systems. I have 6 patents. All would be very boring. They're available, but be boring. But it's not like it's for the general public. It's for a specific audience. And so what I wrote here, they're all nonfiction books. Even going back, this is one of my first books I put out in 1990. It's How to Raise This Ancient Grain. It's very specific for the people that want to do this. I have it, basically, it's my most popular book. It's all over the world. It's How to Raise This Grain, which South Dakota is, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Colorado raise virtually all of the millet in the U.S. And so if people in India, I got Pakistan, China, they download that book and use it as a guide of how to produce that grain. Very specific. These books that I put out now, I want the general public to enjoy them, and basically any reader.
And that's actually, just knowing that it's really cool. First of all, it's not easy. I don't know, I putting your emotions onto paper, putting your experiences onto paper, how is that? When you first start writing, how do you start doing that?
It might start out with a short poem. A duck lesson is about me going to a duck pond, crawling up to a duck pond, and as a kid, I was too loud. Of course the ducks are going to fly away. So when you get older, it finalizes says when life's a lesson. Keep composed. Arrive, quack, and
depart before annoying.
There you go. See?
Oh man. Well, kind of as we start to wrap up here, because we know you have to be somewhere in a couple minutes, but wrapping up here, what is, I guess, when it comes to so far all of the experiences you've lived through, whether it's through writing, whether it's through that 5,000-kilometer bicycle ride you took all the way to to Alaska,
through the Yukon, yeah.
What would you say stood out the most for you? Or has stood out the most for you?
I'm a family guy, and I enjoy traveling with my wife. In fact, I just took her to the airport this morning. She's on her way to Guatemala with our daughter and her grandson. So we've helped on projects down there, both at talked in schools, we've helped build homes and things like that. So doing things with family, and all my books are, you'll pick that up in all of my books, because even on this one, it talks about being on the farm and how my dad raised that and how I learned from my father, and these about children, grandchildren. We have 3 great-grandchildren now, so it's just fun. I talk about my grandniece in here and how she inspired me, to write, basically. COVID shut us down, so I'm done with the trip. So I'm going to sit at a cabin up in Terry Peak. We rented a cabin during COVID, and it was amazing. I sat there and I wrote this book thinking about her and how she would enjoy it, or my wife's great aunt down in Nebraska, how she could just sit in her armchair and be able to transition. So it's really tying in family and making it enjoyable.
And I mean, from what you've told me, it seems like you've done a good job at it.
Well, I thank you. I think so. I know people have appreciated it, and I hope I'm satisfying a need out there for encouraging people to read. Because if they're too boring, they're not going to read it.
Right, exactly. And I mean, as someone that enjoys fantasy, it seems to be that a lot of the time that seems to be the case. The overwriter, they kind of end it on a weird note, or they can't get the story going. But it seems like for your books, that doesn't seem to be the issue.
This would be a fantasy to most people,
Right.
but it's a reality. I have people coming up to me, like at the farmer's market, up to me and said, "How old are you now?" I go, 71. So you bicycled 6 years ago.
Right.
You're still in pretty good shape. Well, I go, next year you get on your bike and you do it. You don't need to buy a new bike. And so you have to enjoy things, give them incentive.
Right. And last question here. Where can some of our viewers, if they're interested in any of these books, I know you mentioned in downtown Rapid City,
Yeah.
and if they can't make the trip downtown Rapid City, where can they find these books? So
Okay.
that way, if they are interested, they can get it online, or maybe at their local bookstore, wherever
Sure.
they are, whether it's Lee, Deadwood, whether it's Spearfish.
Yeah.
Where can they go to find these books?
Oh, you mentioned Spearfish. Henry's Books at Spearfish, for example, is a new bookstore, and I have all my books up there. Liz has my books. Obviously, you can get them on Amazon.com. That's where most people get Barnes & Noble, things like that.
Right.
E-books on these. You can go to Jen at downtown Alex Johnson, Rapid City, and get them. You can always go to my website, relatingtoancients.com. I don't know if you can zoom it in. It's relatingtoancients.com.
I'll try to zoom it in here real quick.
And let me just hold it up there. It's my website, and anybody can go to it. I autograph all books and send it out, postage free, just like you would maybe Amazon Prime or whatever.
Right.
And so you get an autographed copy, and it's just fun kicking another book in the mail,
Right.
signing it, and I'm glad people would take interest in any of my books. Relatingtoancients.com.
I mean, it seems like you've had a very, very, I'd say, active career, whether it's through writing or just in life in general. Again, like you said, family definitely seems to be a big theme throughout your books.
It is, and I made a living in agriculture, so you'll also see the agricultural themes, maps in here of walking from the farm to school, for example, and you see the neighboring farms on there, and it's just, this one, in fact, on the way up there, I got into this one town, and it was some friends from Canada were farming by that town.
Right.
So I got in like 3 in the afternoon, and we called the family. They invited us out for supper, so we got to go to a Canadian farm.
Right.
So we had all kinds of different exciting stuff. So as a farm kid, a lifelong, maybe a life in agriculture in South Dakota, it's just fun experiencing that again in a different way.
Well, thank you, Gary, for joining us on the desk today for our KOTA Territory Author
I
Spotlight.
appreciate you bringing me in.
And I appreciate you kind of taking the time. I know that you've had a long morning here from
No, thank you.
at 6. I know you said you were a morning person, but it'd be tough for some.
You do it every day. I don't have to.
Well, thank you again for joining us. And for those watching, be sure to pick up some of Gary's book at your local bookstore. But other than that, thank you again for joining us. We'll hope to see you in a bit for the KOTA Territory, or KOTA Now's weekend weather forecast after a quick break. But for now, thank you again. Thank you, Gary.
Yep, thank you.
All right, see ya.